Dr. Kirk Herbstreit, and I know I shouldn't be bringing all that up again, but his statements about not having football, I mean, I'm having to put out constant fires over at Buckeye Grove with fans worried about that, and just have to keep reminding people we're only a couple weeks removed from the Rudy Gobert news and them shelving the NBA season for the time being. And I understand that we're canceling events all the way into July at this point, but things are changing daily, hourly, whatnot. I mean, if we really think we know what the world is going to look like come the 4th of July, which seems to be the date that Sandy Barber kind of put out there, the Penn State AD, about when you would have to reopen things in order not to have an impacted football season. And we got a ways to go.
And it's one thing to cancel a one-time event, one-day event, 3-day event versus an entire football season.
Well, here's the thing you won't hear anybody say, and so I guess I'll be the injudicious one to say this, but you have an entire industry of people. And, Kirk Herbstreit made his living in this profession because he embedded himself with Rich Rodriguez and Brent Venables and all these other people. He was a college football player like thousands of other guys, but he became a true student of the game by going and bending the ear and traveling on his own dime and putting the time in with coaches all across this country. And I use those two guys as examples because I know those are two guys that he spent a lot of time with. I assume whoever was at Ohio State, because Cooper was the coach when he was starting to get into television. I'm sure he palled around over there around whoever was working there at the time. But he built his entire career off his relationships and what he learned from coaches in this industry, in this profession. Now let's fast forward to last week. Every one of those people who he had depended upon to help him get where he was in this profession. And granted, he put the time in, he put the work in, he made himself an expert on college football. There was no new wrinkle that's come out in college football in the last 20 years that he hasn't been ahead of and said, oh yeah, when I talked to Brent Venables, he showed me this, or that. Well, in some ways, he spit in the eye of all those people who helped put him on top when he came out and said that he didn't necessarily foresee there being a season in the fall. Now, certainly the ball could be rolling in that direction, and none of us can foresee the future. But I think what we're seeing, the reprisals that have come back over the top at him, the athletic director of Kansas State or Iowa State and Brian Kelly at Notre Dame and all these other people are like, you're one of us. And, you may be a made man and a millionaire many times over, but if there's no football in the fall, none of us are going to get paid. And that's a fact of the matter because Ohio State's got a $200 million athletic budget. And if they don't bring in the TV money from Fox and ESPN in the fall, the money for the playoff in January, the gate receipts, probably $7 million a game. That's $50 million right there at Ohio State. And everything else ancillary that goes with it. How's Ryan Day going to make $6 million? How's Gene Smith going to make $1.52 million? How's Kerry Combs going to make $1.3 million? Madison $1 million, and on down. They're not. They just aren't. And we've seen schools that have already said that they're going to cut some coaches' salaries. Token effort as of today, certainly, but definitely where the ball is headed. I mean, if there's no football, there's a lot of people are going to be doing without in this industry. And I think that's why people have been up. And Kyle Rowland, a friend of ours, is like, why are people all upset at Kirk Herbstreit? Well, because he's threatened, and I wouldn't say threatened is the right word. He's opened the question that there's a moral high ground to not playing football in the fall. And there's a whole industry of people who can't abide that.
Yeah, I'm starting to work on something now where
a series.
Yes.
Is it 30 part long?
Of my own thinking, surprisingly. But where at some point, because everything runs on football. OSU's wrestling coach Tom Ryan was on Twitter urging people to stay home and talking about football. We talked to the tennis coach, OSU tennis coach, this past week, and he said the only thing he loves more than OSU tennis is OSU football. And granted, he was an OSU alum, but all of these coaches rely on football. And if there is no football, there is no women's lacrosse, there is no swimming, there is no this or that. Those things are going to have to be privately funded or by generous donors who have already built buildings, but everything runs on football. And at some point, the players are going to have to be put in a position where, hey, we need you guys to go out there and play. And it may be November, it may be December, but it's almost like they're going to be on the front lines to fund all of college sports. And athletic directors are going to be put in a tough situation where we always have to be about the players, player safety, and they are. But also, you've got at Ohio State, 36, 37 varsity sports. Now in the SEC, you've got 15, but there's still, you're funding so many other things, and it's more than football, where it's bigger than football. Even though football drives everything, you're gonna have to ask these players, or can they even ask these players morally, we need you guys to go make this sacrifice and to be on the front lines of this. And some might get sick, and then if what happens if somebody gets sick, then everything shuts down in that area. Or do they're gonna have to find a way at some point to put those guys out there so that they can make everything continue as seamlessly as possible, or because the money won't be there, as Steve said, without football.
Most schools have 2 sports that are in the black, maybe a third. If down in the South, baseball may turn a profit, or whatnot, but you're really not looking at anybody with more than 3 profitable sports. And when you have 36 sports like Ohio State, or 20 like this school, or 24 like that school, and with Title IX and everything else, it's not like you're just going to be able, and I don't want to get into a huge Title IX discussion and say, well, we're just going to, gender regardless, cut like the bottom 6 sports in terms of the ones that are the furthest in the red. You're not going to be able to do that either. So yeah, there are a lot of problems that, at some very high levels that they're going to have to figure out if the season is impacted and they have to slide it, or, God forbid, we don't have a season, which is something I still really refuse to allow myself to give a lot of thought to.
Well, again, I'm not expert on infectious diseases. I only play one on the internet. It would seem to me that by social distancing and everything that we're doing, they're trying, it's like a wildfire or a campfire that you're trying to tamp it out by isolating the flames and tamping it out. And how far tamped out does this thing really need to be before it's safe to come out of our homes again? I think is something I don't think anybody's really said yet. It's April the 3rd. Sandy Barber, which I give her a lot of credit for what she said, that we kind of need 2-month run up with everybody just showing up sight unseen and not having any kind of organized workouts. Nick Saban said he'd like to see a 14-day learning camp, to replace spring football, which makes sense because that's, again, we talk about installation. So you're talking about early June or early July to stay on schedule. And is within 3 months this thing going to be tamped down to where there's just a few embers here or there that are so isolated that the society as a whole is now safe to return to normal activity? And I think we have to be very hopeful. And again, this is just my impression, what I hear, but I think you have to be very hopeful because we don't have a vaccine for it and may not have one for a long time to completely stamp it out. And without that, maybe some of what Kirk Herbstreit has said is valid. 2 things I will throw in off what you guys are saying. This has given the NCAA cover to kick the name, image, and likeness can down the road. You watch their reactions to this. It's always, we are studying, we are talking, we are considering, we have kicked it back to our athletes to give us their feedback. We have thought about this in committee. Well, the committee can't meet right now because we're all on our own campuses dealing with issues. This has given them the cover they need to kick that can. They're going to kick that can as far down the road. Remember, this thing was settled by the California legislature last year. This is coming. They can't stop it. And if they do, they're subject to federal lawsuits for discrimination if they try. They are prisoners of inertia at this point. but they are doing everything in the interim to kick that thing down the highway as far as they can, and this gives them the cover to not deal with it for the next 5-6 months. Well, we had all the upshot. Well, now we got the run up again. We don't have time to deal with it right now. They better come to Jesus on that issue, because that's one that's going to bite them sooner rather than later, in my opinion. And the other is what Tony brought up. Okay, now it's clear. Okay, it's all clear. Football guys, get out there. Can they do that without saying, okay, we're going to have volleyball games the same day, soccer games the same day? It'll be really interesting to see if they prostitute, for lack of a better term, the football guys and throw them out there to start making the money, and then say, well, it may not be safe for, all these other people, soccer, volleyball. Then we'll truly know that they are prostituting the football players, as we've known for decades. But that's something. It has to be an industry, sports industry wide thing. And there's people talking that the pro sports will come together and say, on this date, we are all starting, and everyone can lump themselves if they don't like it. That NBA, MLB, and NFL may just say, and NHL may just say on whatever day, June 15 or whatever, we are going back to work, because it's been stamped out enough that we are going back to work, and that may give NCAA some cover as well. But complex issues, no doubt.
The Kevin mentioned not wanting to talk about the end of the season. I just put a poll on Twitter asking Buckeye fans if they would accept a loss to Michigan this year if it meant that the season would happen with no restrictions and no delays. Do you know what the what that poll looks like right now? Anybody want to take a guess?
100-0. No way we're losing to that team up north.
Surprisingly, it's only 88% to 12 saying, yeah, no, I will not take that loss. No, thank you.
That's funny.
I'd rather have no season at all than a season with a loss to Michigan.
That is well stated, Tony, because I've been asking people the last couple of call-in shows, what would you give up? What would you pay? What would you sacrifice to guarantee a college football season for 2020? But that is the dilemma right there. That is the one to pose right there.
Ultimate sacrifice.
All right. It's been a great discussion. Tremendous job, you guys. I unfortunately need to move on, but thank you so much. And I hope everybody out there appreciates the hour plus that we are given by Kevin Noon from Rivals, Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts 247 Sports, and Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone each and every week to talk Ohio State football and beyond. And Steve, just to give you the heads up so you don't trip up on this one, because you missed on Cedric Saunders, Yakov 22 is reminding you that there was a running back taken out of Euclid 30 years ago. So don't miss him. You may bypass, you may miss on him as well.
No, we had Robert in the 1990 analysis, and obviously, he had a great 2-year run there at OSU and went on to the NFL, Minnesota Vikings. And he was that 1990 class. Joey Galloway was in that class too. So they had some winners in that class in 1990 as well.
And Robert Smith, of course, with a very unusual, great freshman season, sat out 91, and then came back and had the big 92 season, capped off with the tie game against Michigan.